Hello, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. For the month of March, we're going to be talking about breaking patterns. And this is so difficult, and we've got several different patterns of thinking and behavior that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about toxic relationships and going back to them and keep going back to them. We're going to talk about negative thinking. We're going to talk about all or nothing thinking. And we're going to talk about self-love and self-sabotage and how those work together and how they're opposite of each other. And I want to first talk in general about breaking patterns or breaking habits, because they're the same thing essentially. But first of all, we have to notice the pattern. You can't solve something. You can't develop a solution without knowing the problem. And it's so important for us to realize that, because a lot of times you don't even realize. You don't realize what's going on. We're so busy in this day and time that we barely have time to breathe, right? It's wake up, get the kids ready, go to work, come home, cook dinner, barely watch TV, barely see your spouse, put your kids to bed, maybe spend 10 minutes with them, and then you start all over again. Either you're planning work, planning the next day, or something, but our minds are constantly going, and it's like we're filling up our schedules to the T, and we just don't have time to think about what we're doing in a way. We don't have time to think about the negativity in our lives or the bad habits that we have, and we don't take the time and put the time within ourselves. We just don't, because in the whole scheme of things, we put ourselves on the back burner most of the time. Everybody else comes before us in some form or fashion, and we just let other things take over and just take control in a way. It's like we're living, but we're not really in control. And we have to first give ourselves part of the control, because we're living one single life, just one. There's no second chances. There's no time to repeat. There's no time to extend. This is it. And this is the only life we're going to have, and we are the ones that can take control of it. A lot of people ask for advice, or ask what they should do, either friends, family, or the internet, the phone. Sometimes people Google the most important things in their life, whether they should do it or not, asking total strangers. And we need to realize and we need to understand that we have all the answers inside of us if we will just take the time and we'll just make the effort. And it's something that it's a hard concept for people to understand. But that's the first step. We need to take control of our lives, and we need to take control of our thoughts. And, one of the most important things that I can tell you, that I can recommend, that I can tell you definitely you have to do at some point or the other, is just take a pause. Now, I am fortunate enough that I can take long pauses or deep pauses and look within myself and look at my surroundings I am fortunate enough to have that ability. Some people don't. Most people don't. But if you can just pause for a few minutes and just look within yourself, it'll help you so, so much. And I can't tell you the power of the pause. So we need to look inside of ourselves, stop for a minute, just for a minute or two, and just look inside of ourselves and try to determine what we need. One good thing to do is I've found is at the beginning of your day, after you've woken up, maybe had that first cup of coffee, just take like 5 minutes or so and just say, what do I need today? What do I need to fill me up? What do I need? Not tomorrow, not what I needed yesterday, but what I need today. Let's stay present in the moment. And that's another thing that's so important. We need to focus on today, not what we need in the future or in the past, but today. And, just take those extra few minutes and do that and just think about those things. And it's amazing what'll come up. Sometimes you don't even know that you need it. Sometimes you wouldn't have even thought that you need it. Maybe you need some attention from a certain person. Maybe you need to solve a certain problem, but you can't solve it if you don't know it, right? Maybe you need to exercise that day. You need to eat healthier that day. There's so many different things that we need if we just stop and think about it. So that's the first thing to do. And when we pause and when we're thinking about these things, it's okay if some of them are negative. Everything does not have to be positive, and everything's not going to be positive, and we need to stop thinking that it's supposed to be. It seems like now in these days that we tend to think that anything in life, if you're doing the right thing, it's going to be easy. If you're on the right path, it's going to be easy. Sometime, for whatever reason, if things work out, it's going to be easy. It should be easy. And that's not true. We're influenced by movies and social media and so many different things, but those things aren't necessarily true. Those things could be manipulated to make us think they're true, right? To make us believe certain situations are perfect when they're really not. So it's important for us to understand that some of the things that we're going to find in these pauses will be negative, and that is where you insert the change into these negative behaviors, whatever they may be. And a lot of times it is self-sabotage or toxic relationships. Sometimes it's negative thinking. Maybe you are always negative or always hard on yourself or always a self-critic. But you need to figure that out before you know what to do. And so, it's okay if there's these problems and these things that come up. One thing that I did in the beginning of my healing journey was to write. And I would kind of write like freehand writing so that I didn't think about it. I just wrote. And it's amazing what comes out when you do that. You don't think about punctuation. You don't think about the words that you're writing. And if it's complete sentences, if the grammar's correct, you just write. And then, maybe 5-10 minutes, just write. You'll fill a page or so, depending on how fast you write, and then go back and read it. You know, when you're not in self-protection, when you're not thinking about perfection, it's amazing the thoughts that come up. You know, we think thoughts every fraction of a second. A thought's coming in. Some of your neurons are acting, and we're always thinking about things. I mean, that's what your mind does. And when even when we're sleeping, because we have dreams. And so if we just let some of those out, instead of a thought coming and then we automatically say, oh, I shouldn't think that. Oh, I shouldn't do that. Oh, I have no business thinking that. Where did that come from? You know, all these things that hold us back. But I noticed that when I did just write, it's amazing what came up. And I was able to identify so many things, and looking at them from day to day and reading them. And sometimes what I would do is read the daily things that I wrote and then save them. I have tons of notebooks filled with, just pages of things that I wrote. And I would read the daily things, but then I would read the weekly things and just see if there was a pattern in my thinking or a pattern in my actions, to see if maybe I would need to make a change there. And maybe I would need to do something different. And when you do that, those things that we find are so difficult because they're hidden. And because the patterns, we've been doing them for so long, years, decades. And so it just becomes second nature to us. And we never even knew that we were doing these things. I found out a lot that what I thought was real was not. And the more I thought about things, the more I understood that one problem that I really had was just stuffing down my feelings, suppressing those feelings, and then just leaving them alone, not facing my feelings and what I had thought. And because of that, I would make up stories of myself and of other things that I would tell myself. So I would generally think that things were very different than they actually were. And then when I went back and looked at so many different things, I was like, wait a minute. No, I need to reshape this thinking because this is not correct. Either this is not what love is, or this is not what I should have done, and I see this pattern, or this happened to me, and I need to stop it. I need to course correct. I need to somehow cut this out of my life because it is not good for me. It is detrimental to my mental health, to my physical health. And so, by doing that and by breaking these patterns, we're able to heal ourselves from the trauma that we've had or from whatever we're experiencing, but we're also able to form new habits. And that's the second thing we need to do. Once we've identified the pattern, then we need to decide to do something different. Decide on alternative habits or patterns, or decide on normal thoughts, decide on, not normal, sorry. Decide on different thoughts, decide on different actions, but something that is different to replace the negative. And you won't believe the difference that makes. Just small differences, small changes make such a big difference in your mental health and the way you live in your life. And And I can't stress that enough. And, you know, it's amazing to me with the things that I've gone through and the things that I've experienced. Later in life, I re-look at things, and I've noticed patterns, and I've noticed characteristics that have been placed within me because of what happened to me. And I'm able to course correct those things to form healthier relationships, healthier patterns, healthier habits, a healthier way of thinking. And it's not easy. I was very negative towards myself, and I still am. It's very hard for me, and it's a daily struggle, a constant struggle. But I've learned to, when I am able to recognize the negative thoughts or the negative feelings that are approaching me, I'm able to stop. I'm able to think and identify it, and then I'm able to find an alternative or find a way that is not true, that negative belief, that negative story that I've told myself for so long isn't true. And it keeps happening. It keeps happening, and you have to continue with the alternative. The negative will come in, you make an alternative, and you move on. And that continues. And it continues daily. It can continue hourly. It just continues, and things flood. Things flood your brain. Things flood your mind, and you're constantly having to do this practice. And so, it becomes a habit. Sometimes you get addicted, to these things too. And we don't think about that part of it. But it's like an addiction, and it's like breaking an addiction, because sometimes you get addicted to these negative beliefs. You get addicted to all of these different things, these negative behaviors, because it's familiar. These negative ideas and actions are familiar to you. And the human brain is wired to pull close to the familiar. And it just is. If something's familiar to us, then we just do it. And sometimes we just automatically do it, but we're always drawn to the familiar because our minds are fearful of the unknown. And we don't understand that, and we don't know that, and we do that subconsciously. If something is new, then we fear it, and we don't want to fear it. So we just retreat to the familiar. And it can be anything. It really can be anything. But if you acknowledge that, if you acknowledge that familiar, and you see that the familiar is negative, then you can change it. It's hard. I realize now, because I've been in therapy for a while, and my therapist has helped me to be able to identify these things. And I realize now that I have been clinging to many negative emotions and retreating back to these negative ideas and holding on to them because they brought me comfort, because they were familiar. And in a life that changed so much, because my life has changed a lot, because of my various health situations, because of the repercussions of my health situations, my life has changed a lot. And when I was undergoing that change, I needed something familiar. And these negative patterns were familiar. So I clung to them, and I clung to the negative emotions of self-criticism, of fear, of so many different things and thought patterns. And now I realize that I didn't need to, that I should not have, because there was a different way of doing things and a different way of believing and a more truthful way of thinking of things. You know, that's why it's so important to validate each other, to listen to each other's stories. And, you know, it makes you feel so much better to know that you're not the only one. You know, I have read countless stories. I have heard countless stories. I am so thankful that so many people feel comfortable sharing things with me, sharing their stories, sharing what's happened to them, sharing their joys, sharing their pain. And I've listened to it. And sometimes I'm like, hey, that's me. And I felt these emotions too, or I've gone through this too. And it's so nice to know that I'm not the only one. It brings you strength. It brings you healing. It brings resilience. It brings so much to you. And when you realize you're not alone in things, and it's just very empowering. And I think it's so important. And that's another thing that we can do. Actually listen to each other. So many times, you know, we're so distracted. We listen, but we really don't listen. You know, we're either on our phone or planning our day or watching our children or, you know, doing this or doing that or watching TV while somebody's talking or, you know, I mean, there's so many things that we're doing and so many distractions that we have that we really don't listen to each other enough. But if you do, and if you really listen, you can learn so much. I can't express that enough, because I think about things in my life and relationships that I've had and things that have happened to me. And it's been so important for me to hear these stories and these different things that have happened to people. I have chosen not to read like nonfiction. I've chosen not to read fiction. It's just because, you know, when you have a nonfiction story or book, when you hear somebody's memoir, when you hear these things, then you're like, oh, I've done that too. Oh, I felt that too. Oh, that happened to me. And it just feels validating. You know, I mean, you can choose to do it whatever way you want to do that. And I'm totally 100% not condemning people for reading nonfiction, for, you know, getting lost in books, because sometimes that's what we need. Sometimes we don't need actual people to experience these things. Sometimes we need a fictional character. That's just not been my experience. Sometimes we need to know that fictional characters can go through these things. Or, you know, so I'm definitely not condemning people for doing that. That's just not the way that I've chosen to approach things. But, you know, it's everything in life. Do what works for you. You know, we're all different. We're all unique. So whatever works for you, just do that. But for me, collecting these stories and finding these people that have experienced things has really helped me. It helped me to identify things in my life and situations and experiences in my life that's been so detrimental to my healing journey. So, once we identify the habits, then we can come up with solutions. Uh, it's just like, and with the addiction comment that I said earlier, we all know how addiction works and how difficult it is. And so once we recognize that pattern, then we can start the solution to the addiction, whatever it may be, or to the thought pattern, to the actions, But it's so important for us to identify those kinds of things and then to come up with alternatives. I know I was definitely not taking enough time for myself. Anybody that knows me knows that I was always going a mile a minute. I was always living life on the edge. And I've had so many people tell me, I've never seen somebody that can pack so many different things into one day. I've had multiple jobs. Most of my life, I've had multiple jobs, ranging from 2 to 4. And, it's hard to fit all those things in, but I did. And it was so difficult for me to do this for this one, do this for that one, make sure that this happens, make sure that that happens, to where there was nothing left for me. But I learned that I need to at least take a minute or two for myself. And I started meditating. And meditation is such a good practice. My mind was not just my actions, but my mind was going a mile a minute. So it was hard for me to start slowing down my mind. But I took small steps. I was able to first meditate for 1 minute, and I set a timer, and I watched that timer so that I knew and that I understood when a minute passed. And once I could do that, I was able to move up to 3 minutes and move up to 5 minutes. And now I can sit at least 20 minutes to myself and meditate on things. And when you do that, you come up with so many different things of self-discovery. And I realized that I did not really know myself at all. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know a lot of the things I did. I didn't know what I liked. Um, you know, I just didn't understand those kinds of things about myself, because mostly to avoid conflict, I would just do what the other person wanted to do. It just became automatic, and it just became a habit. And, I was doing all these different things, and I was liking all these different things, but was it really me that liked those things, or was it other people that liked these things? Now, sometimes it was me that liked it, but sometimes it wasn't. I was just doing things to avoid conflict. And so I needed to recognize that. I needed to discover that, but I couldn't discover that unless I took the time to think about it. And so those kinds of things are important for self-discovery, for us to unpack things and to take time for ourselves And a lot of people, especially women, are because women are taught that, if we take time to ourselves, we're selfish. We can't take time to ourselves because we have to give to everybody else. We have to do for everybody else. And taking the time for ourselves is not the right thing to do. It's not possible. And that's just so wrong. And that's setting ourselves up for failure, setting ourselves up for hurt. Because we need to refuel ourselves in some form or fashion. We just need to refill our cup. We need to refill our gas tank or whatever drives you, because they get empty. They get empty. We run so much, run, and we need to fill up somehow. We give and we give and we give, and before long, there's nothing for us to give to ourselves. So we need to take that time for ourselves, whatever it may be, and we need to look at different practices, whether it's meditation or another practice that I've just started doing is Tai Chi. Sometimes you have to use movement as well to get you to focus on things and to get you reconnected to your body and reconnected to your mind. And those are important as well. Sometimes just eating healthier is something that you can do because you feel better and you're able to do so many different things in life better. And you just feel better and your head's clearer, so you can make better decisions and you can do more things because your body is healing and it's stronger. Drinking water is the same thing, because as long as you're hydrated, your body works better and you're able to do more because your body isn't sick. Your body isn't struggling as much. So, we need to find these different things. Exercising is a good thing. I, at one point, was running, and I found that so healing and so motivational. It motivated me in life to do things. Another thing that I did that I don't do anymore, but I wish I could get back into the habit of doing it, was taking a cold shower. You hear about polar plunges and all these different things, where people, like especially athletes, they'll just submerge themselves in ice baths after they've worked hard and played hard, and, different things like that you hear about. It's really refreshing. And I remember, when I did those kind of things, I had so much energy. I felt better. And I was able to go through the day better, to focus better. It just did do a lot for me. And that would be a good thing for me to do now. Now that I have established that was a good practice that I don't do anymore. So, we can think of these things, but we need to take that extra minute or go that extra 2 steps to do these things. And it doesn't have to be big. It can start out, we're not going to do everything perfect the first time. We're not going to, start running or start exercising and do 5 days of this and then 2 days of this, so it's 7 days a week. We're not going to do that. We're not going to be able to do that at first. Working out 7 days a week is difficult. So I would suggest working out 1 day, then 2 days, then, What I used to do, I ran 5 miles a day, and I did do that 7 days a week just because it made me feel better. But I didn't start, run 5 miles the first day. What I did was gradually, I started to run half of a mile, walk half of a mile, run half of a mile, walk half of a mile. And I do that for a couple weeks. And then I got to where I'd run a mile, walk a mile, run a mile, walk a mile. And then it was run 2 miles, walk 2 miles, and finish out with the running. And before long, of course, it took me months to do that, but I eventually got to where I could run 5 miles. And then it was run 5 miles one day, then walk the next day. So it was a slow transition, but I was able to get to the 5 miles a day, 7 days a week. And that's what we have to remember. It's not the leaps, but it's the small puddle jumps. It's not, we're not going to just get to where we're going the first time, but we need to take steps. You don't walk across the room and just jump across the room. You have to take steps across the room, one step, one step, one step. And then you get there. And it may be slow, and you may grow impatient, and you may take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and then 3 steps forward and 3 steps back. It's not always forward. We're gonna go back. That's what makes the habits hard to break. That's what makes the patterns hard to break. But eventually we'll learn, because your mind adapts so incredibly well to things, and it creates new habits and it creates new familiarity. So don't give up. Don't give up. And don't be so hard on yourself. Give yourself grace. When you're starting something new, you have to give yourself grace. You have to understand that you're going to go back. That's just the way we are. That's the way we're built. But we can do it. And if you need to, get someone else to hold you accountable and do it with you. Some people like to go to the gym together. Some people like to talk about healthy food options. Some people like to compare this and that, and hold each other accountable. That's a good way to make sure we do those kinds of things. And then it becomes a habit. And then we don't have to have somebody else to hold us accountable for certain things. So I just invite you this week to try and do some type of practice. Maybe I mentioned the practices and you want to try something I mentioned, or maybe you want to try something else. Let's have our ears open and our minds open. And when we hear different things and different strategies and different practices and different habits, let's try it. The first thing to anything is an open mind, because you can't receive knowledge, wisdom. You can't receive anything unless you open your mind and stay open. So I want to thank you for listening today and tuning in. And I invite you to listen to other episodes of the podcast. This is available wherever you get your podcasts. I also invite you to go to my Substack, see what I write, and see what you think about what I write. And let's start a conversation. Send me a message and we'll start. and we can learn from each other. We can talk to each other. But whatever you do, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, just remember that you do not have to suffer alone.